The studio in New York on a bitterly cold winter night was nothing less than a modern-day Roman arena. The stage lights, stark white and blinding like blades, slashed through the darkness, illuminating two opponents preparing for a battle, not of bloodshed, but of words. A battle just as lethal. The air was thick and suffocating, charged like the moment before a great storm. The hushed murmurs of the audience whispered through the space like wind howling through cracks. The cameras grilled, poised for action while the production crew huddled in the corners, beads of sweat rolling down their foreheads despite the icy air. Across America, MDNtellions of viewers fixed their eyes on their screens, awaiting a prime-time annihilation, a spectacle where even the smallest misstep could reduce a reputation to ashes. On one side stood J.D. Vance, a senator with eyes as cold as forged steel, his tightly pressed lips concealing an unshakable resolve. On the other, Sarah Kline, the queen of television, her smile as artificial as an iron mask, her gaze flashing with the arrogance of someone who had made a career of stabbing opponents in the back. She had come armed with a flawless plan, wielding razor-sharp questions designed to pierce through J.D. Vance's marriage, exposing it as a festering wound for the public to feast on. But what she didn't know was that under these lights, she was the one about to be stripped bare. The lights flared on, the countdown blared like a funeral bell. 3, 2, 1. Sarah Kline leaned forward, her blood-red outfit hugging her frame like fresh spilled carnage, her lips curling into a merciless smirk. Her voice was cold, each word an arrow dipped in poison. Senator Vance, you've written books, climbed the Senate, and now hold millions of eyes in your hands. Don't tell me it was all just luck? The question seemed casual, but in Sarah's mind, it was the first bullet. She had sharpened it for weeks, a trap carefully laid to pull him into the quicksand, where she would unleash her real attack. Usha, the woman behind J.D., whom she believed to be his Achilles heel. She waited, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a predator closing in on its prey. But J.D. Vance did not flinch. He sat there, his navy blue suit crisp and unyielding like armor, his gaze locked onto hers like a hunter calculating the perfect strike. He leaned forward slightly, his voice rolling out deep and thunderous, each word a blade slicing through the air. Luck? You dare use that word, Sarah? That's the cheap trick of your kind, of the media, a pathetic excuse to smear the sweat, blood, and tears of those who dare to stand up. Luck? Luck doesn't write books. Luck doesn't break through walls of injustice, and luck sure as hell doesn't pull a country back from the ashes. I have fought through sleepless nights, battled those who wanted to drag me down, and I don't need anyone to hand me luck. You want to play this game? Then prepare yourself, because I didn't come here to lose. Sarah faltered for a fraction of a second. The smirk on her lips froze like a crack splintering through glass. The studio trembled with a dead silence, broken only by the pounding of her own heartbeat. This was not the easy prey she had crushed before. But she wasn't about to retreat. Lifting her chin, her voice slashed through the tension like a knife. So you claim it was all your doing? No luck at all? No one opened doors for you, Senator Vance? J.D. Vance smirked, a slow, blade-thin curve of his lips. Open doors? You think I waited for someone to lay out a path for me? Yes, I had opportunities, but I smashed those doors down with my own hands and built my own empire from the wreckage. I don't need pity, and I didn't do it alone. But tell me, Sarah, do you actually care who stands behind me? Or are you just here to dance around on your cue cards like a puppet? Sarah tilted her head slightly, eyes glinting like a wolf catching the scent of blood. She had been waiting for this moment. Her voice dropped, feigning curiosity, but thick with intent. Oh, not alone? Then enlighten us, Senator Vance. Who stands behind the great J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance met her stare, his eyes piercing through the arrogance in hers like a blade through armor. He knew exactly where she was leading him. He did not waver. He was ready. His voice rang out, solid as tempered steel, yet burning with an unshakable fire. You want to know? Fine. The person behind me is Usha, my wife, the woman who has walked through hell with me and built a heaven from the ruins. She is my spine, the fire in my chest. But I know you don't care about that, do you, Sarah? You just want a knife to drive into my heart. But let me warn you, Your blade will shatter before it reaches me. Sarah's lips curled into a sneer, but something was off. Her smile now looked warped, a crack tearing through a mask too tightly held. She thought she had found his weakness. Her voice slid out, smooth yet lethal, an arrow loosed straight for the kill. Usha, a name cloaked in mystery, a woman too quiet, isn't she? Too silent for a man like you. Doesn't the public have a right to know more about her, or are you hiding something, Senator Vance? The air inside the studio thickened, pressing down like iron. The audience barely breathed. Sarah waited, fingers tightening around her cue cards as if clutching a final weapon. But J.D. Vance did not waver. He inhaled, his eyes narrowing like a warrior preparing to strike the finishing blow. When he spoke, his voice thundered through the silence, splitting it like a storm crashing against a mountain. Silent? You dare call her silent? Usha is not silent. She is a mountain, unshakable, a blade that chooses when to cut. She is a lawyer, a mind sharper than any of your cheap tricks. She has stood firm while people like you tried to rip us apart. What does the public need to know? That she is stronger than every lie you could spin? Or is it that you just want another puppet to dance to your second-rate script? Tell me, Sarah, do you want truth or do you want blood? A faint laugh rippled through the audience, small but enough. Enough to send a dagger into Sarah's confidence. She clenched her teeth, her fingers trembling under the studio lights. She could feel her control slipping, but she lunged forward like a wounded beast. I'm not making anything up, Senator Vance, but you can't deny that your fame has lifted her up. Or are you saying she would be here without you? Isn't her greatest success being the wife of J.D. Vance? The temperature in the room felt frozen, the space trembling under the weight of a deadly silence. J.D. Vance sat still, his eyes dark as an apocalyptic sky. Sarah smiled in triumph, convinced she had struck his heart. But what she didn't realize was that she had just lit the fuse of hell itself. J.D. Vance leaned forward, his voice dropping to a deep, menacing growl. The roar of a lion provoked. Lift her up? You dare open your mouth and say that? Usha never needed me to stand tall. She was kicking down doors long before I ever arrived. She speaks 3 languages, graduated from Yale, and built her career with her own blood and sweat. Her success isn't in being my wife. It's in how she lives, how she fights, how she holds me up while people like you slither in the mud of your own making. You want the truth? Here's the truth. You are not worthy of saying her name. Sarah tried to interject, her voice shaking with a mix of panic and desperation. I'm not denying her, but you have to admit you paved the way for her. J.D. Vance's hand slammed onto the table, the crack of impact like a gunshot. Pave the way? Who do you think I am, some kind of king handing out favors? Usha never needed me to shine. She is the fire that burns through every doubt. You want to talk about influence? I'm the one she lifted up, not the other way around. But you wouldn't understand that because your hollow mind only values power and spotlight. Look around, Sarah. You're digging your own grave. The audience erupted, a wave of applause crashing through the studio like a tsunami. Sarah shrank back, her face flushing red, as if she had just been slapped across the face. She screamed, her voice cracking under the pressure. But don't you see? This pressure, these lights, the scrutiny. It's a cage for her. She wasn't born for this game. J.D. Vance raised an eyebrow, his gaze flashing like a blade ready to cut throat. A cage? You dare call it a cage? Usha is not trapped. She is the storm that destroys everything in its path. She doesn't need to scream to prove herself, unlike your media circus, always shouting to hide its own weakness. You want to lock her into your narrative? Try it. But you'll be the one crushed first. Sarah clenched her jaw, her hands trembling, on the verge of shattering. She lunged into her last desperate strike, her voice breaking with madness and desperation. Senator Vance, stop dodging the question. You are powerful, successful, you could have anyone, and yet you stayed with Usha, a woman who has aged with you. Have you never considered trading her for someone younger, someone more worthy of your glory? The studio disappeared into nothingness. A collective gasp ripped through the air, like wind howling across a battlefield. Sarah stood there panting, waiting for the moment J.D. Vance would collapse. But he didn't move. He sat still, his gaze cutting through her like a dagger, cold and merciless. Then he spoke. His voice was low, deep as a death knell. You want to know what value is? Value isn't something you throw away when it ages. It's what you hold on to because it is everything. Usha is not some object to be traded. She is my blood, my bones, the woman who pulled me out of darkness. And you dare suggest I discard her for some cheap face? You don't just insult her, you insult millions of people watching, people who have fought for their families, for their love, for something you will never understand. The audience roared, a deafening thunderstorm of applause that shook the studio. Sarah collapsed into her chair, her eyes hollow, the look of someone who had just lost everything. J.D. Vance stepped out of the lights, leaving her behind in the wreckage of her own making, a fallen queen, a defeated player in the very game she created. The roar of the audience had yet to fade, echoing like a tidal wave crashing against jagged cliffs. J.D. Vance stood tall, his silhouette an unyielding mountain beneath the blinding stage lights, his cold, piercing gaze swept across the room before settling on Sarah Kline, now nothing more than a broken shell, slumped in the chair that had once been her throne. He said nothing. He simply adjusted his collar, every movement a declaration. The victor does not need to roar to prove his strength. Sarah sat there, trembling fingers gripping the edge of the table, as if clinging to a cliffside moments before the fall. Her mask of arrogance had shattered, revealing a pale face, hollow eyes staring into the abyss of her own downfall. A whisper, dry and desperate, escaped her lips. I didn't mean to, but her words were swallowed by the screaming voice of the producer in her earpiece. Cut the feed, cut it now. Yet nothing could save her now. It was the final cry of a sinking ship, the last gasp of something already lost. The cameras kept rolling, mercilessly recording every second of Sarah Kline's collapse, the beads of sweat sliding down her forehead, the stunned horror of her production crew as they realized the irreversible disaster unfolding before their eyes. J.D. Vance walked out of the spotlight, leaving chaos in his wake. The audience's applause thundered on, a victorious anthem ringing through the studio, through television screens, through millions of homes across America. But he didn't look back. And he didn't need to. The final blade had been plunged, not into Sarah, but into the rotten media empire she represented. Within minutes, clips from the interview exploded across social media like an uncontrollable wildfire. The hashtag Vance versus Sarah surged to the top of the trending charts, accompanied by thousands of comments. She dug her own grave? J.D. Vance just taught the world what real values look like. Mainstream media just died at his hands. Even critics reluctantly had to admit, this was not just an interview, this was a public execution. And Sarah Kline, she had had her own neck to the guillotine. By the next morning, her show was indefinitely suspended. Sponsors fled like rats abandoning a sinking ship, leaving her stranded amidst the wreckage of her once glorious career. She sat alone in a dark office, the dim glow of her phone screen flickering against her ashen face where texts of mockery and termination notices piled up, the final knives carving out her downfall. And J.D. Vance, he returned home, where Usha awaited him not with spotlights and applause, but with a gentle, unwavering smile. The smile of a woman who did not need the limelight to shine. He pulled her into an embrace, whispering, "They try, but they'll never understand." Usha looked up at him, her eyes burning like an unextinguishable flame. They don't need to. We know the truth. That's enough." Under the studio lights, truth had spoken. And in the ruins of the defeated, J.D. Vance and Usha stood firm, unshaken, immovable as a mountain. Sarah Kline had become just another name crushed beneath the wheels of history, another lesson carved in stone for those foolish enough to challenge values with hollow arrogance. In America had witnessed it all, and they would never forget. In the ashes of exposed deception, Honor was not just preserved, it was raised high like a victory banner in the storm. The battleground under the lights was never meant for the weak. It was a crucible where souls of steel were forged and empty arrogance was crushed into dust. Because when you stand tall on the edge of life and death, when you protect what is sacred with both heart and blade, no fire can consume you. It only makes you burn brighter. America had seen not just a battle, but a reminder that true values are never up for sale. And those who dare to challenge them with deceit will pay with their very soul. Will you stand in the light to defend the truth? Or bow before the storm of deception? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think was the true victor of this fateful night? And don't forget to like and subscribe if this fire has reached you.